Oliver from Rugby League, in my opinion, here today with a very special guest. It is Jason Amos. How are you today, Jason?
I'm good, Oliver. How are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, it's good to see you too. I'm doing all right. Obviously, we're just talking off air about the current COVID situation and how that's unfortunately looks like it's put an end to most junior rugby league here in New South Wales and the New South Wales Cup, etc., which of course is something I want to talk to you a bit about with your involvement in the junior rugby league sphere with the Bankstown Bulls, which we'll get to, and also you've obviously just founded the Virtus High Performance Rugby League Academy, which we'll be getting into as well. But first things first, I want to ask you about your time at the Melbourne Storm. I believe it was around 2013 to 2015. You were actually involved with the Storm on the coaching staff somewhere there. I'm actually not too sure about your specific role, so I'd love to hear about it and actually love to hear about what you did at the Storm.
Sure. I actually got involved with the Storm. I was already in Melbourne. I'd been working in high performance in rugby union for a couple of years. I'd been with the Queensland Reds. I was with the Melbourne Rebels. I was very fortunate to be involved with the Wallabies in their tests against British and Irish Lions in Australia. And I bumped into a guy that I knew at the Melbourne Storm, and we got talking one day, and he said, "Look, we'd love you to come down and do some work with our junior development programs at the Melbourne Storm." Because what they were doing at the time, with rugby league not being big in Melbourne, they were getting guys from rugby union, guys that had the athletic ability that were in AFL, and converting them into junior rugby league players. And I found that really an exciting opportunity. I thought that was something that I'd love to do, was taking this raw talent and turning them into rugby league players. And we had a development program there with a guy by the name of Tony Adams, who's the current Australian schoolboys coach. And we set up this really good development program down there. And it was great because we had all these raw kids coming in with all this excitement, and they just wanted to learn. And I've never worked with a group of young athletes that wanted to learn like these kids do. And it was really refreshing for me to work with these guys from under 16s through to under 20s. And it was a really great experience. But more importantly, it's what I learned as a coach. Working in that program, under Craig Bellamy, where everybody through the system from the top down followed the same passion, the same structure, the same culture that was set in the Melbourne Storm. And it's something that I'll never forget, and it's something that I still use to this day.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Something I'm interested to know about, you talk about your involvement, I guess, with the junior development at the Melbourne Storm and those 16 to 20-year-olds coming in. How much, I want to say, exposure did they have to that first grade side? Obviously, Melbourne have been the best team in the NRL since the NRL era began, statistically. And obviously, they still had your Cam Smiths, your Cooper Cronks, Billy Slater were there, Craig Bellamy's still there. What opportunity did those young blokes have to, I guess, sort of mingle with that team, train with that team, get some advice from your Craig Bellamy's and the other players I mentioned?
Yeah, Craig was very much an all-in coach. His philosophy was always one club, one team. So everybody from those first grade guys right down to the under 16s, it was all one club, one team. That was his philosophy from day one. What impressed me the most when I was at the Storm was the fact that you would get guys like, you'd be talking to your players in a conference. Billy Slater would walk in. Billy Slater would sit down. He would then get up and he would speak to the players. Cam Smith was always available to talk to the players. Frank Panisi was always available to talk to the players. Everybody in that club from the top down, particularly those top guys. I often get a bit upset because I see guys that talk about Cam Smith and, they like to have, I think a lot of that's probably out of jealousy that he didn't play for their club, but he is the most unbelievable guy in any football that I've ever worked in as far as being a club man and looking after those young players. So it's the only club I've ever really worked in where everybody was approachable. Nobody was bigger than the club. No one. Everybody had their job to do, yes, but everybody was available to help everybody else. It was like this big, I don't like to use the word family atmosphere, but it was like that. Everybody was helping everybody and everyone was available. And it was just that culture that started from the top all the way down to the under 16s. So everything that was happening in the club, like I would often go and speak to the first grade strength and conditioning coaches. So the NRL strength and conditioning coaches would then be telling us what we need to be doing with these young guys to prepare them for that future if they stay with the Melbourne Storm through the ranks. So it's all about a part of that, breeding that philosophy and that culture of the Melbourne Storm. It was just the most amazing experience.
Yeah, well, I guess that one club mentality in terms of from the very top down has gone on to be crucial for the Storm in terms of their longevity of their success, because we look at the success, not this year in particular, but at least in 2019 of the Sunshine Coast Falcons, that dominant season they had, minor premiers, and all the Falcons players who have gone on to play for the Melbourne Storm. This was a stat that I believe was brought up by Denon Kemp, bloke in a bar, not too long ago when the Storm had signed Xavier Coates. Xavier Coates is the first current representative player that the Melbourne Storm have signed since they signed Mick Crocker back in 2005. You know, before they won the comps in 07, 09 and 12, 17, 20, he was the last one that they signed. But during that period, it's really been either developing those players and bringing them through, for example, your Ryan Pappenhausen's, your Cameron Munster, so on and so forth from the current side, or signing players who are maybe a bit out of favour at other clubs, and moulding them and turning them into superstars as part of a superstar side. Like a player off the top of my head this season I could bring up is Amos Smith from the Bulldogs. Never a bad player at the Bulldogs, but look at what he's gone on and been able to do at the Storm. He's possibly going to be a cog in a premiership winning side this season. For example, next year, Melbourne have signed Nick Meaney on a minimum contract. Now, I'm not sure how much you've seen of Nick Meaney, but for me, he's been one of the Bulldogs' best players. And personally, for the past couple of years, I would have been playing him at fullback for the Bulldogs. Now, he likely won't get a starting role at the Melbourne Storm, but he could be a crucial cog in their machine in terms of a 14 maybe, or something along those lines. So again, I guess it's just that Melbourne Storm juggernaut. And I guess the whole point of my spiel is that one club mentality from the top down is crucial for that to be able to happen. So I want to ask you next, how crucial do you believe it is to have that mentality at a football club? Does it work at some clubs, do you think, and not at others? Or should every club be adopting that holistic point of view?
Well, that's interesting because a lot of people have said to me, why don't other clubs do it? If it's that successful, it's not that simple. Everybody has to buy into it. Everybody. You can't just say, okay, we're going to adopt that philosophy and that's what we're going to do, because there is no arrogance at the Melbourne Storm. There is none. Not one player shows that arrogance. Not one player is above anybody else. Cameron Smith, the same. And I equate it a little bit to the All Blacks philosophy because I had the honour of being able to see how the All Blacks operate. And it's very much about nobody is bigger than the team. Richie McCaw would be sweeping out dressing sheds after a test match, and these types of things. It's very similar at the Melbourne Storm. To have that successful, everybody from the top, from the CEO, Frank Panisi, everybody down to the very bottom has to buy into it and has to be a part of it. Otherwise, it just does not work. That's the beauty of the Melbourne Storm. I believe that having them in Melbourne away from Sydney has actually helped that. I firmly believe that being away from that Sydney mix of culture and nightlife and things like that has actually helped that culture to be created. I don't think that culture will ever be broken at the Melbourne Storm. I think you'll always see that now. Even when Craig Bellamy eventually retires, I think you'll see that continue because it's ingrained in them now. It's a part of their DNA. And you'll hear the experts like Phil Gould and all that say it's a part of their DNA, and it's true. It won't change. It's a part of them now because it's just so inbred into their culture that that's how they are and that's how they operate and that's the sort of club they are. So it's not that easy for another club to say, let's be like the Melbourne Storm, because that would be very difficult for them to do because they've got to change years and years and years of the way they've been before. I think the only team to come close to it, probably the Sydney Roosters, that they give it a fair shake. But I think now this season you're seeing just a few little chinks in the armour. And, of course, they've had a lot of injury troubles too this year, so you can't be too harsh on them, I guess. But they just don't have that year in, year out consistency that the Melbourne Storm does year after year. And that's just But like I said, I really think that being in Melbourne has helped that. I think being away from Sydney has helped that. And when they're not in Melbourne, they're on the Sunshine Coast. So, they've just got that. They just keep the clear air around them, and there's no noise. There's no media following them everywhere. And I just think that really helps them.
Yeah, well, you do bring up the Sydney Roosters, and you're right. They are the team that probably comes the closest. And again, statistically, they are the second most successful franchise in the National Rugby League era. I look at that, and I also look at a strong foundation, a strong culture, but it's different in that way. Whereas I personally don't see them, and of course, I'm completely on the outside looking in, but it does seem like they don't necessarily have that one club mentality, but it's different as in players want to play for that organization, so they're willing to maybe take a bit less money to play for the Roosters, whereas the Melbourne Storm don't necessarily need to worry about that because they are bringing those blokes through, as we spoke about before. So it is a bit different, and I guess you could say they're both very strong foundations, but Melbourne's just that bit stronger. At least that's my point of view of it.
Look, I agree, because you look at the Brisbane Broncos, okay? Brisbane Broncos did it for years, year after year after year, because they brought in Queensland kids. They brought in guys that grew up wanting to play for the Brisbane Broncos. That's all they ever wanted to do, and it was a part of their DNA. Every kid in Queensland was inbuilt in them that they had to play for the Broncos. Jonathan Thurston wanted to play for the Broncos. He was disappointed when he couldn't get a gig with the Broncos. Cameron Smith, Billy Slater, Cooper Cronk all wanted to play for the Broncos. What's happened to the Broncos? The Broncos started to bring in players that didn't grow up with that passion to want to play for the Brisbane Broncos. They came there for money. They came there for, go play for the Broncos, good club. But it wasn't that in their DNA of all these other players of years past that wanted to play for the Broncos. Guys go to the Melbourne Storm to get a chance and to be coached by Craig Bellamy. And every player that's gone there to play for Craig Bellamy has finished up becoming a better player. That's a part of that inbuilt culture of the whole club, not just Craig Bellamy. That's the difference between those two. I think that the Sydney Roosters, that's why I say there's a little chinks in the armour, because it's about the eastern suburbs lifestyle. It's about the Sydney Roosters and the, and the glamour and the. It's good short term, but I think you'll see a few years of the Sydney Roosters starting to struggle now before they can't keep that same consistency that the Melbourne Storm has.
Well, if we do look at the NRL era as a whole and look at the path that the Melbourne Storm and Sydney Roosters have even taken to this point, Melbourne, for the most part, I think they've missed 3 final series in their history. If that,
in their history, yep, correct.
You look at the Sydney Roosters now. Okay, they had the strong period, I would say, overall between 2000 and 2004. Yes, they only won one competition in that time, but in that time they made the grand final. 2000, obviously 02 when they won the comp, 03, 04. But then between 05 and I would say 2013, there was a down period, which is weird to say because, yes, they did make the grand final in 2010, but we've got to remember they weren't necessarily the dominant team heading into that. Even that final series, I think they finished about 6th. And then they beat a couple of teams on the way to losing against a dominant Dragon side in 2010. Other than that, I think there were a couple of finals appearances here and there, but they were really your average run-of-the-mill mid-table team. Whereas Melbourne, during that period, arguably had their best period. And then the Roosters sort of pick up again in 2013, and that's sort of where we've been from there. But that's where Melbourne have been the whole time. It's sort of like the Roosters have been a bit up and down. And you're right, it does look like, at least within the next couple of years, not even due to the injuries, but I guess players aging, the Roosters might again go through a bit of a down period. Not to say they'll crash and burn like Brisbane have, but yeah, a bit of a down period where Craig Bellamy's just re-signed with Melbourne until the end of 2026, definitely as head coach until the end of next year. We can pretty much guarantee at the very least, Melbourne being a top 8 side, I think, until the end of 2026 now, likely a top 4 side, very likely a top 4 side.
You'd be a very brave man to bet against it at this stage. Yeah. You'd be very brave. And just on that point too, and sorry to interrupt because I hear every year about how, Greg Inglis left. Trouble for the Melbourne Storm. No, they recover from that. Billy Slater's going to leave. Cooper Cronk leaves. Cameron Smith retires. All of a sudden, it's doom and gloom every year for the Melbourne Storm, but they just keep this replenishment going, and they get guys like Pappenhausen, Harry Grant, all these guys coming in, Dale Finucane, who the Bulldogs didn't want, and they must give them nightmares. All these guys keep coming in that he has this replenishment going, this whole succession plan. So he's constantly looking around, and you've got to give Paul Bunn, who's their recruitment manager, you've got to give him a big rap, because he's the guy that's responsible for going out and getting all these young guys that looking for, Josh Adokar. Look at him. He's come from the Tigers and struggling to make first grade, and now he's a superstar winger. All of these guys that they bring in and just developing, constantly getting this pipeline of players, and they're about to lose Adokar. They're losing Finucane. There'll be another lot coming through. They'll be there. Nick Meaney he'll do very well down there, and all these other guys. Pappenhausen's back now, and you'll just see this constant growth in the Melbourne Storm of churning these new players through, and and that's it's just a delight to see. It's a delight to be a part of, and you just learn so much. And it's a totally different way of coaching rugby league that I think is just, like I said, I just don't think other clubs will ever get it.
Yeah, well, one thing that also separates the Melbourne Storm is that, in a way, their roster's always well stocked. I'm going to take us back to that Nick Meaney example. Now, Nicho Hynes, obviously off to the Cronulla Sharks. He has been the first string fullback for the majority of this year due to the injury of Ryan Pappenhausen. But whereas most clubs would wait until their first string fullback is on the way out and assigned elsewhere for the next season, that's when they go and try and grab the replacement. For some clubs, it doesn't work out because they're unable to sign another player of a similar stature. What Melbourne have done, they've still got Pappenhausen locked in. In fact, they've actually extended his contract. It's when they've lost that second string player is when they look for that suitable replacement. They don't wait until it's the first stringer. They wait until it's the second string player. And Melbourne have gone and now got a player who arguably he's still got years ahead of him, will be good enough to be a first string starting fullback as the replacement for Nicho Hynes, the second string fullback. And not only that, he can cover the back five. So you've got Xavier Coates coming in as well. He can also go to the wing if you need him to. Hey, Brenko Lee's also heading to the Broncos next year. He can cover the centers. It's sort of a lot of clubs wait till it comes to that surface level of your starters where if they lose a player, they bring and they swap in for that. But it seems Melbourne do it beneath. So they've always got the next player to step up just in case something does happen to the first string player. It's that contingency plan that I don't think a lot of clubs have. Sure, other clubs show it in certain isolated, I'd say, situations, but it seems Melbourne have done it for their whole team, and they've done it for years and years and years. Look, is there anything else about your time at Melbourne or anything else about the Storm that you'd like to say? Because we've been talking about them for ages, and look, we could talk about them forever and ever.
Yeah, look, Melbourne Storm's my passion. One of my biggest regrets is leaving the Melbourne Storm. I left for family reasons, and you always put family first. But it's one thing that always sits in the back of my mind, how much I miss being at the Melbourne Storm. That's probably the only thing that I certainly regret. There are days where I wish I was still there. It's just the most amazing. Anyone ever gets the opportunity to go down and spend time with the Melbourne Storm, go, because you'll never regret it.
Yeah, one, I guess, could compare it in terms of a holistic sporting point of view is like spending time with Barcelona or Real Madrid or something like that. I guess that they are Australia's version of clubs like that over in different sports. I want to move on now to your time after the Melbourne Storm. I know what you've been up to in recent years, as I brought up, but that sort of period where you left the Melbourne Storm and the years following that, were you involved much in the game in terms of coaching? What did you actually do?
I've always kept involved in the game. I go back as far as 2003 with South Sydney Rabbitohs. I spent time with the Canberra Raiders, and then a lot of time in rugby, and then back into NRL. NRL, I played rugby league, so I'm a Queensland country boy. So it was it's a part of me. It's a part of what I've grown up with. So when I left the Melbourne Storm and we moved the family back to Sydney, and my wife was setting up a brand new business here in Sydney, I had first 12 months. I think I didn't do much, and then I jumped on board and I helped the Sydney Roosters with their junior programs just in pre-season, just as like a bit of a guest role, I suppose, for want of a better term. At the end of that, I bumped into a guy who I'd known for 25 years. His name's Corey Adams. He's a head of surf lifesaving at Maroubra and former Roosters player, and got chatting with him, and he was the president at the time of the Coogee Randwick Wombats. And he said, Jason, what are you doing? Are you doing anything after the Roosters? And I said, no. He said, come down and help us. So I finished up down at the Coogee Randwick Wombats. I was going to be doing some strength and conditioning for them. Within 3 weeks, I'd become their head coach. They hadn't won much in, 5 or 6 years or something, or, a club that was bred on success. And we put together a great squad that year. I became the head coach, and we finished up winning the grand final. We lost one game all year and won the grand final 32-0. So that was 2019. And that was a really good experience to be a head coach of such a well-known traditional club. And, I live in Maroubra now, and I walk down the street and people still remember that. But that was a really good experience too. And I left there. I wanted to start a rugby league academy. It's always been my passion after spending time in the Melbourne Storm, to create a rugby league academy. I set up what was called at the time the Western Sydney Rugby League Academy, and we operated that out of Bankstown. The reason being that I met some guys in Bankstown, some lawyers actually, who were passionate about helping kids there and things like that. So we set up the Western Sydney Rugby League Academy. That was October 2020. Within 5 weeks, we were expecting to have 50 kids. Within 5 weeks, we had 150 kids signed, ready to come through that first academy. And it was massive. It was 10 weeks of gut-breaking. I was exhausted, but it was one of the most fulfilling experience I've ever had in rugby league, just getting these kids and more importantly, watching how they developed after that academy. A lot of them have gone on to Bulldogs development programs, and a couple of them finished up at the West Tigers and just things like that. And there were kids coming from the Central Coast, from Wollongong, and to see them go on to bigger and better things was quite amazing. And then what came from that was, it developed into, we were using the Bankstown Bulls home ground as the base. And what came then is that they wanted to re-enter an A-grade rugby league side with the view of having Sydney Shield at the back end of that. So I took on the role as the A-grade head coach at Bankstown Bulls. Our first meeting, we had one player turn up, which was a bit of a scary thing when you got one player. And it just happened to be a player that played for me at the Wombats. So because he heard that I was there, he turned up, he got the call out, and the next training session we had 35. I think we finished up with 75 players wanting to play within 3 weeks. So unfortunately, the season got cut short and we didn't get to show exactly what we could do. But we were really finding our feet. We just knocked off a team that was full of Sydney Shield players right before it all fell apart. So we were heading in the right direction, but unfortunately the season got cut short.
Yeah, well, I'm lucky enough to, I guess, have been able to hear a little bit about what you were actually doing at the Western Sydney Rugby League Academy and the Bankstown Bulls through one of your coaching staff and a mutual friend of ours, Trev Smith, and he was talking about what you guys were able to do. And honestly, I remember late last year, just us and a few of the guys were sitting down at the local pub having a few drinks, and he came in and he actually spoke with passion. It was like he was selling the idea to us of what was going on. And it sort of seemed like, from what he was talking, that passion, I guess, was being expelled through everyone, not just the coaching staff, but the players as well. And he did talk about how kids were coming from everywhere. So I'm also interested to know, because I believe you had Luciano Leilua from the Tigers come down for a session. I just want to know, for him as an NRL player coming down for a session, how do you think he sort of reacted? And did you think, I know it was just a one-off thing, but do you think as an NRL player he could tell that these kids had potential and that passion was there?
Look, Lucha was great, because often you'll get these guys come in and sometimes they'll just stand around and they might say a few things here and there and they might come over and talk. Lucha actually walked around. He watched guys. So he didn't do much of the coaching side of it, but what he did, he watched. He watched the drills. He watched what guys, and he would just quietly walk up, take them to one side, have a little chat to them. And you see these kids then when they were coming back in after Lucha had spoken to them, they were just totally different. They were just 10 foot tall, and they were just, here's this guy walking around the field, and he's giving us some tips, but he was very encouraging to everybody. I don't think there was one kid out of that entire 150 at some point that he didn't acknowledge or speak to. And that was the difference with having him involved. And we knew Luch through, once again, I'd met him through players that have played for me, his cousins. I've been coaching his cousins for years, and he just had that instant want to help these kids and just be a part of. And he put it back to, he was giving back to the game that's been good to him, and he come from his background that he came from, but he just wanted to help these kids, and he wanted to give back to the game that's been good to him, and I admire him for that. And we still keep in touch now. He's unbelievable, and he's probably the one shining light at the Tigers at the moment. So I wish him all the best. But he was sensational, and we had some great people come to that academy, and Carl Jennings, and I don't know, Carl Jennings probably isn't a name that a lot of people would know because he's kind of more back office, but he was the head of performance at the Penrith Panthers, head of performance at the Canterbury Crusaders and Super Rugby, the Canberra Raiders for a while, where else? Well, the Warriors for a little while. This guy he's a medal winner when the Christchurch earthquake was on. He won a bravery medal for pulling people out of houses, and this guy is just, he's the sort of guy you can just sit with for 10 minutes and walk out feeling like you're bulletproof. He's unbelievable, and he's been a very good friend of mine for 20 years. And to have him involved in the Western Sydney Rugby League Academy, you wouldn't see 150 kids and not one of them said a word. They just listened to him the entire time. And you never see a group of kids just glued to somebody like they were to Carl when he was talking. And, that's those sorts of people that, and you talked about Trev Smith, and people say, oh, how long have you known Trev? I knew Trev online, but Trev's story really inspired me of where he's come from, the challenges he's had. And I'm a big believer that you're only as good as the people around you. I can't do my job. We have a word that we use, which also comes from Trev Smith, and it's Ubuntu, which is a South African word. Basically, it means you're only as good as the people around you. You can't be who you are unless those people are who they are. And that's one of my big beliefs. We have it on our dressing room wall. And it's Trev Smith's one of those people that I just love having around me, because he just, even if you're feeling a bit flat, Trev's got that ability to lift you up and lift up everyone around him. And he's just the most amazing human being. And you can't be good at your job unless you have those sorts of people around you. And I've been very blessed to have those types of people around me.
Oh, yeah. Well, just on Trev personally, as I said to you off camera, he used to actually be one of my bosses for my old job at Series About Rugby League. And when I was first hired, Trev didn't know me, I didn't know him, found out we're both from Penrith. So the first thing he did was message me. He said, I'm going to pick you up and take you out to lunch and get to know you. He took me out to lunch, sat down, and, this is the job, freelance, journalism for a rugby league website. And he took me down. We sat for a couple of hours, spoke about life, told our life stories. And from then on, we've been close. And I've since been able to jump on the Footy and Frothies podcast, which I'm now a co-host of because Trev introduced me to those guys. And even though I'm now with another rugby league website, we still keep in contact and talk about our love of the game. We've been through Footy and Frothies, being able to go to Hanson Park and interview people. And funnily enough, when we went to that's when he told me everything about the academy. So he's all for giving back, I would say. And that seems like the big theme for you guys, yourself and Carl. And, you talk about Luciano coming in. It's about giving back to the world of rugby league, and I guess to the future as well with those guys that you're bringing up. I now want to move to what you guys are actually doing now. Obviously, COVID has had its impacts, but yourself, Carl, Trev, and you've brought Luke Lewis in, which is great to hear. The Virtues High Performance and Rugby League Academy, I believe. Tell us a bit about how that came to be, and what obviously COVID permitting, what you guys are looking to do in the near future.
Well, the success of the Western Sydney Rugby League Academy was great, and it still runs, mind you. It's still going in Bankstown. That's not going to change. That'll still be running. But I had this view of going bigger, branching out, going to other areas, Carl Jennings has a facility in Blacktown, or at Blacktown International Sports Park. That's where the Olympians trained during the 2000 Olympics. The most awesome. He's got a great gym there, a full field. He's got a training field out the back. He's got rehab area. It's just the most amazing facility. And Carl and I got together after the Western Sydney Rugby League Academy, and Carl said, Jason, we need to do it here. We need to set up at this base, and we need to do it here. So the Virtus High Performance Academy, which I set up, Carl Super 6 High Performance. Okay, let's do a rugby league academy. It was the one thing that he wasn't doing at the time, and he has a passion for rugby league, so we decided to set up the Virtus Rugby League Academy. Trev was the first person I called, and I said, Trev, what do you think? And he just, like, I've never seen a guy get so emotional about wanting to, because it's more his area. It's where he grew up, and he knows everybody, and he got really passionate about it, and it was a no-brainer in the end. So we had a couple of meetings with Carl, and it just all came together beautifully. And Luke Lewis, because of Carl's involvement at the Penrith Panthers, he knew he had a good relationship with Luke Lewis. He was already doing something with Luke Lewis. So we had a chat with Luke Lewis, and we didn't even have to ask him. It just, you know, he was saying he's in. You know, we didn't even have to ask him. So it kind of just happened. It was just something that was meant to be. And we wanted to make it more than just a rugby league academy. We didn't want to be one of these academies that just go out and get guys running and doing sprints and doing this and doing push-up. It's a rugby league academy. So, yes, there's a component that's based on testing, into conditioning, into strength, but more position-specific too. We do position-specifics, but there's a very, very large mental health aspect to it. So there's mental wellness and resilience. We include that into it. So Carl is very big on making sure that young rugby league players coming through are mentally, have a mental wellness aspect and are resilient. So we put a very big emphasis into that. We have the attacking skills section, which Luke Lewis helps us with. We do a very big defense component now with changes of rules in NRL. So it's a very full, efficient now rugby league academy in one of the very best facilities you'll see anywhere in Australia. And our goal now is to make this the number one rugby league, rugby union academy in the country, and we believe we can get there fairly quickly.
Well, I'll tell you what, you've sold me on it, and I've got no future.
I'll send you a booking form. I'll send you a booking form, mate. You can join the next one.
No, what I was going to say, but although you've sold me on it, and I've got no future in rugby league, there may be those out there who do have a bit of a future in rugby league, are listening to what you're saying right now and think, oh, this might be something I want to join. How can people sign up?
They can go to our website, www.virtus, VIRTUS, highperformance.com, virtushighperformance.com, or email me, Jason, JASON, at virtushighperformance.com. You know, our academy works out to about $10 a session per player. So it's we're not there to become millionaires out of it. We really want to create this to be something that kids can get involved with. But we don't want to just pigeonhole them either. We don't want to say you're just coming here to be rugby league. If we think there's talent elsewhere for them, we will guide them. We've got people involved that come from athletics, that come from, you know, other sports as well. It's not just a group of rugby league guys that got together and decided to do something. We're doing this seriously, but we want to be known as an organisation that clubs can come to and say, have you got such and such player coming through that might be bang? You know, players that are getting signed by big clubs. We've already spoken to New South Wales Cup clubs who want to come down and see our next academy. That's how impressive they've been with what we've put together. So for us, it's exciting times. You know, COVID slowed us down a little bit. Our next academy starts on the 2nd of October, which is a seniors and juniors academy, two separate academies. So 17 to 24-year-olds in the seniors. That's guys that are on the cusp of Ron Massey New South Wales Cup that want to go to that next level. We'll help them. And then there's the kids that are 12 to 16 age group as well that are developing. So we're going to, and, you know, they haven't played any footy for months. So this is a good opportunity for them to come and get involved. We're going to take some teams away to nines tournaments and things like that at the end of the academy, just at no extra cost to them, because we want them to play some footy as well. So we've got all bases covered. We're going to be, I can tell you now, I assure you, with the people we've got on, it won't be long before we're considered the very best sports academy in the country.
Well, I'll tell you what, Jason, if you guys will have me, I'll have to come down to one of your academy sessions just to watch. Obviously, I can't provide too much insight or analysis. Hey, maybe you can use me as a guinea pig to show the kids what not to do.
Mate, you are more than welcome to come down anytime. I'll send you all the details. I'll email you all the details of the academy and the program, mate. I would love to have you down anytime you want.
Yeah, well, as I said, you've sold me on it, and it's something that I'd love to see in action, and maybe get out and get a bit of footage of whatever I can, and I guess help the people see what you guys have got going on, because I think it's something, as I keep repeating it, you've sold me on it, something that I think a lot of people should be able to see and have the opportunity to experience, especially those young players in the area who are coming through, who are on the cusp, but just need to find, I guess, that gateway through to where they want to be. As you were saying, players on the cusp of like your Ron Massey Cups and your New South Wales Cups, the Virtus High Performance and Rugby League Academy might just be what they need to get that boost up into that level. So I'm definitely excited to see what goes on with you guys in the future. But for now, Jason, I want to thank you so much for jumping on, telling your story, telling us all about what you guys are doing at Virtus. And I can't wait to see how it all turns out.
Mate, thank you. Honestly, I'm honoured that you asked me. Seriously, I've been following what you do, mate, and I'm honoured that you asked me. I appreciate it.
Well, no worries. Well, hopefully we see each other in person out there at Blacktown sometime.
We definitely will.
Soon. October 2nd.
Definitely will. Thank you very much. Thank you.
No worries. See you later.